Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Kisa Nishimoto. I am the director of events here. I'm curious to find out who is visiting for the very first time. That's a good crowd. Yeah, tech coming in. Yeah. To give you an overview of the Riveter, we are a national membership network of community, content, resources, and co-working spaces. We say built by women for everyone. We welcome everyone, women and allies, no matter race, gender, sexuality, age, marital status, socioeconomic status, industry. We're here to close the pay gap amongst men, women, across races, and really become a community network. We like to say we might even be becoming a modern union for women, maybe. So in Monday through Friday, thank you. Monday through Friday, this is a co-working space, yes. We have freelancers, we have small businesses, entrepreneurs here getting support, growing their business. And then in the evening, we flip the space and it opens up to the community for programs and content like this. That's really important. If you have any questions about membership, we have a new membership called our Ally, which is $19 a month. And it includes access to our daytime programming and evening programming and a couple hours of co-working hours. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. Without further ado, I'm happy to welcome the panelists to the stage. And I also just want to say thank you to Black Women Talk Tech and for Chase for making this event possible. Without supporters like Chase, this content wouldn't happen, and we're so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kisa. All right. So, as I said, my name is Rosalind Johnson. I'm the Seattle chapter lead for Black Women Talk Tech. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist representing the investment side. So for those of you who are interested in the money of startup world, Van Harris. Van's career has spanned 3 continents and includes substantive management, private equity, and M&A, and cross-border experience. She has experience working in East Africa, London, New York, and Seattle. And we'll have them all go through and talk more about some of the interesting work that they're doing with their organization. Right now, she's Managing Director of Investment Strategy at Unreasonable Group. Our next panelist is Denise Aquilar. She's a campaign strategist at Nat Collective and founder of Denise by Design. She's also the former co-founder of We Steer. Denise is a first-generation Colombian-American serial entrepreneur and former co-founder of a local automotive startup. Her body of work lies in multiple industries: healthcare, wellness, tech, automotive, and fashion. So glad to have you here. And then last but not least, Vicki Owens, who is CEO of Taliaferro IT Consulting. Vicki, as co-founder and CEO and a resident certified Scrum Master for her organization, has also served as an internal consultant on matters of agile and change management. She has broad experience and comes from launching multiple businesses over the years. So presently, Vicki and her team are working on their 3rd startup. All right, you give us. So we're gonna dive right in, and if you could, I guess starting with Vicki, and we'll work our way down. Tell us a little bit about the organization that you're currently working in, and sort of how you got into this tech world and what you're doing now.
My path into tech has been atypical. I never wanted to be a programmer or a coder. I never thought of technology as a field of interest. I happened to meet a man and fell in love, and he was a technology professional. He was a coder, and through his eyes, I got to see what technology is really about. And as he progressed in his career, I learned more about technology, and I thought, wow, I like this. And that's how I started. In terms of what we're working on in Taliaferro IT Consulting, we help companies align their long-term business goals with technology in regards to governance, risk, and security. And then we have an internal incubator where we work on our own products. And over the years, as Rosalind stated, this is our third startup, so we're working on something right now that we're really excited about.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone, and buenas tardes. Again, my name is Denise Aguilar, and how did I get here? I think it's a similar story. It was also atypical. I never thought I would be here today. All the industries that Rosalind mentioned earlier, I've definitely tried so many different fields. In every single field I've tried, I go all in. So whether it's fashion, tech, payroll, like you name it, meditation, I sold the air. I go all in. So last year I actually was a co-founder of a local automotive startup. We were in the middle of raising money, and we had a team of 7 employees. So we were doing a lot at once, but through time, we learned that we both had different visions for the company, so we decided to split back in December. So through networking for over a year and a half, I ended up going back to my first love, which is fashion. So now I style women who are in the C-suite or speak on TV or on stage to make sure that they are showing the persona that they want out into the world. But yeah, a lot of lessons to share.
Hi. The one thing I'm not is a techie. So, but if you can explain your technology to me and I understand it and I'm getting excited about, it means a $1 check. So that's where my tech experience is. This wasn't supposed to be my story. I grew up in Kenya. Nobody in my family, especially women, had been to college. But I had a very pioneering mom and dad who decided that myself and all my brothers were going to get the same opportunities. So definitely paved the way for me. My idea growing up was I was going to ride my horses and stay in Kenya on a ranch. So very different to my life here. About 3 years ago, I started working on the Rise Fund for a couple of clients and became extremely interested in the intersection between impact, technology, and profits. And so took a transition earlier this year to head up the investment team at Unreasonable. Unreasonable is a totally unreasonable company with reasonable values. What we do is we help growth stage entrepreneurs to scale their businesses all around impact and the SDGs that were identified by the UN. And my primary goal for 2020 is to raise our first global impact fund, which 20% of it will be specifically for women CEOs. So, thank you for having me.
So this first question is mainly directed towards our founders. What past skills help prepare you for the role that you're in now? So for those of our members who are interested in becoming founders, and they're like, hey, can I transition, can I do this? Can you talk a little bit about what skills help prepare you for the role you're in now?
For me, I come from an event management background, so being able to look at the big picture, but also be keenly aware of details, definitely helped me transfer into a founder and then CEO, because you have to be able to do both. Interpersonal skills help a lot. Knowing how to lead a team. If you're working in a space where any of those kinds of things that you're doing, they can easily transfer to founding your own company. Knowing how to work with people, how to influence people, how to convince people to do what you need them to do, and at the same time, getting them excited about what they're doing. All of that's really important to help move people towards the goals that you have.
Yeah, that's good. So my path, I don't want to say you have to go to school to become a founder, but it worked in my favor because my role as a co-founder, and even today, I'm always a marketer. So back in school, I studied communications with a minor in business, and then to please my mom, I got a master's in corporate and organizational communications which honestly taught me the whole gamut of it. So marketing, advertising, PR, event planning, you name it, like we knew every single slice and dice within it. So when it came to being a co-founder or even a founder of a company, it helped me understand full picture, not just be in the weeds. Like for instance, if you're an engineer and you want to be a founder, I recommend you look higher level because you're going to have to run a team. You're going to have to see everything that's going on, not just the day-to-day work, because you need to now forecast for the future at the same time and make it happen. Another thing that really helped me, honestly, is mentorship. Back in New York, so I'm from New Jersey, I forgot to say that. Hi, from the East Coast. From New Jersey, and working in Manhattan as my first jobs, I learned very quickly that it's who you know. So even with checking off the boxes with degrees and having the right internships, I learned very fast. Backstory, also Internet Vogue. So Vogue opened my eyes to mentorship, where you connect with the right people who opens the right doors for you to show you how it gets done the shortcut way. So if there's a maze, you don't want to go through the maze by yourself. You want to kind of just find someone who already figured it out and just follow them. And through that, that's how I ended up shortcutting a lot of things in life. Hence why I'm a serial entrepreneur, because I learned, I was like, all right, this path isn't the way, this path isn't the way. Let me choose the path that is actually providing the right type of fruit. So mentorship is the second piece, and third piece are books. So I'm not sure if anyone's still reading, but statistically, a lot of us stop reading after college. But today, some of the books that helped me with being a founder is Grit, How to Win Friends and Influence People, VC Deals by Brad Feld. So all those books basically almost talk about the same thing about networking, mentorship, getting the work done, and also just always being on top of the pulse. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. And I guess from your perspective, what are some of the skills or traits that, someone to walk into your office, you said they need to impress you, like what are you looking for in a founder?
I think that's true, and it's kind of alluding to something that both of you said, right? So it's internal and external. The internal is just about you being prepared to take that position, knowing that in yourself you are ready, both from a confidence perspective, but also these are many hats that you're going to wear. So much comes from the fact, as you explained, like experience. You'll be marketing one day, you will be making tea the other day, you will be recruiting as in particular with a new company. And so just being okay to do all those jobs, I think that's and it becomes clear when people are pitching. Secondly is external, right? Know your shit. So many times people come in and you're asked questions, and there's so much there in books, online, and things about how to do a pitch, ask for help. And they fail on those steps where they get asked very difficult questions. And so a lot of it about knowing your shit is not only just, of course, being able to have somebody understand what it is you're saying, convince them, but also making sure that you've done enough market research to know your product works, right? If I have a product, of course I'm going to go behind it, otherwise why am I doing it? Get litmus tests, right? Make sure the product works. What's your competitors? Have answers ready that are going to be asked, and you can pull up, hey, what questions do private equity VC investors ask? Get ready with those answers, and then also know what it is that your strategy is going to be over the next 3 years, beyond just saying, yeah, I want to sell the business, or I want to raise a Series A, or I want to raise a Series B, I want extra revenue. There's got to be some oomph in what it is that you're trying to sell. So.
Thank you. So I just want to circle back to something, Denise, that you had touched upon. You said, these were some of the books that I read here, finding a mentor. Could you talk about some of the other things that you maybe interacted with on your path in terms of maybe workshops, things that were both useful, which some of the things you already mentioned, and things that were a complete waste of your time. So, as for Denise and for Vicky.
You're having me jog my memory. I'm like, oh, what did I do? Okay, so networking, like in this space, definitely helps a ton, because when you do not have a mentor, you are trying a lot of different avenues. So networking helped a lot with figuring out, okay, maybe this person knows someone who knows someone who knows someone, which will lead me to someone else, which did happen. A lot of the VC firms in Seattle have events, so that's kind of nice to attend there. You'll be literally in the room. What else helped? I joined a incubator called Founders Institute. So that helped a ton. That was another shortcut or a key to life. They laid out everything you need to do as a founder to get your company off the ground, or if you already have your company off the ground, they at least help you with the next steps to get going.
Things that were a waste of time. You're
Waste of
why
time.
did I do this?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is hires. Bad hires were a waste of time. The saying is hire slow and fire fast. I've definitely, unfortunately, had to fire like 3 people in the early stages, and that was painful. So just understanding what people's goals are, because again, as a founder, you're not just doing the work, you have to project. Because if a VC is asking me, hey, what's your exit strategy? And I'm like, I don't know. That's a bad answer. You might as well just leave the room. So I think hires are a waste of time. And maybe certain books I was given, which I don't recall.
Okay.
But the only one I fully remember was VC Deals, because that to me felt like the Bible. Had everything in there. Like, I bought it immediately, and I bought the ebook because you know you're gonna need that book forever. So it helped.
Vicki?
I have attended, and I still do, lots of workshops, classes. I'm always looking for that one nugget that I didn't know before. And you never know where that's gonna come from. When you say waste of time, I never think of anything that I attend as a waste of time, because somebody may say something and a light bulb will go off. You never know where that idea is gonna come from. But I believe in continuous improvement. My daily mantra is create, build, improve. So I'm always trying to do that, not only for myself, but for our businesses. And workshops, classes, I'm always going to. Attorney law firms often hold workshops. I'm going to one next week about private equity. I attend those. I attend everything I can possibly attend just so that I can find that piece of information that I didn't know. I'm also big on volunteering. For 5 years, I volunteered for the MIT Enterprise Forum Northwest. I served as operations chair in volunteer engagement, and I made great connections through that organization. So volunteering is also another huge factor for helping to find out what paths you need to take. So I don't really think of, in books, definitely books. I'm always rotating 4 or 5 books at a time. I now, since you can have digital books, is wonderful, but I used to get on a plane with a bunch of books. So constantly reading, keeping up with everything that's going on in business, because as a founder, you not only need to know what's going on in your industry, you need to know what's going on, period, in the world, in the business world. CNBC is wonderful for that. Just Wall Street Journal, read everything that you can possibly read so that you not only know about your industry and the major players and who were successful and who failed, and also pay attention to the failures so you can try to avoid those steps. I don't think of anything as really a waste of time.
All right. So in terms of going through your path and your, running your company, what were some of maybe the hurdles that you had, pitfalls that you came across along the way, those that you were expecting and those maybe that you still saw coming, and it was tough to handle those?
During our second startup, we were able to secure angel funding. Our user base was growing, and back in those days, hosting was really expensive, right? So as we're getting all these customers, hosting costs are going up, we need to secure more funding, we weren't able to. That hurt a lot. So I think a lot of our hurdles have been capital. And again, if you don't know someone, and I also have a little string about networking. Networking, it works sometimes, but you can't go into a networking situation expecting someone to introduce you to someone. It's not supposed to be transactional, right? You're not supposed to just say, hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? Because the belief is it's a give and take situation, but it's not always like that. And that has also been a hurdle. I was attending a workshop one day, it was all day long, breakfast, lunch, everything. I sat next to this man. We had a wonderful conversation all day. I'm like, oh wow, maybe I can get him to be a mentor, right? At the end of the day, at 4 o'clock, I said, hey, would you mind if I keep in touch with you? He says, I don't have time for you. So networking sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. You have to have thick skin. It did feel like a dagger in my heart. I had to not take it personally, but we're human, you know, so you are gonna have some personal reaction to that. So I think that when you network, don't expect a lot. If it happens, cool. If it doesn't, then you just have to move on to the next event.
Yeah, I concur. For me, 2 biggest hurdles, funding and EQ. I think that was the biggest piece. First, funding, and actually, Vicki and I were talking about that, how a lot of VCs would ask, oh, how was your family and friends round? And then my answer would be, it was $200. I raised $200 from all my family and friends. Wow. So that was a learning lesson, and it was just difficult. And then on top of that, I was a full-time entrepreneur. I quit my day job to do this full-time. So with that, I was surviving off my savings. I liquidated my 401k. My parents were helping, so that was the family and friends round. They were helping me just live so I can build this business. So that was a lot, and it wasn't just myself, my co-founder as well. He quit his day job, so we're both just stressed and scrambling and just trying to build something as quickly as possible to bring in money as quickly as possible to pay our 7 employees and then pay ourselves. So it was a mess. And then paying all the websites and the hosting and everything we had in between that. So those were some massive financial hurdles. Oh, and the co-working space we're paying for. Just money was coming out everywhere. But then the second hurdle was your emotional quotient. So with that, with entrepreneurship, there are many ups and downs. And I feel like we romanticize the idea of, oh, I'm gonna be the startup founder, it's gonna be great. But the thing is, you're doing this daily. You are living and breathing and eating your business all the time. And just like Vicki mentioned earlier, you're not just focusing on your industry, you're also focusing on all the industries around you, because when you start looking at everyone else, we're almost kind of doing the same thing once you find that common thread. And that's why I love marketing, because you find the common thread quickly. But with that, whenever we were stressed or upset, a lot of emotions were running high, and that could be demoralizing. So it was a lot of hard work on just remaining positive. Not happy, but positive. So every single day coming in and rallying up the team, or rallying up your co-founder, or just even yourself. Like, I have affirmations that I tell myself every single day, and I've been saying them for 2 years. I have affirmations for nights, and another affirmation to say when I leave the door. So 3 affirmations every single day, 3 sets. So it's just a constant battle of reminding yourself that you are enough, you are worthy, you are powerful, you can do this, but also money. We need money.
I think another, if I may interest, okay, another point about co-founders. It's very challenging to find a co-founder that you can work well with, that you're all aligned. We've had to disengage from co-founders, and that was very difficult. But if someone says they want to be a co-founder in your business, you have to make sure that they're going to contribute as hard as you do, that they're not just sitting around waiting for you all to make it happen before they commit themselves. So commitment, them being willing to go to their resources and input their resources. You want to make sure that they believe in what you're doing as much as you do, and not just there to wait on the sidelines for the glory part if it ever comes.
So a couple of things that I think. One, I'll go back to VC deals. I'm not a VC, but just know that VC deals was written by VCs so they can get the best out deal for themselves. So just know that. No disrespect to the VCs, but I think it was a brilliant idea for them. That's why I think sometimes we hear a lot of people say it's not very helpful. Couple of pitfalls I think we see from our end with respect to especially young entrepreneurs in the startup stage in particular, is so. One of the biggest reasons why funders turn away funding for companies, and this is across the board, is because they cannot see the dynamic between co-founders or the C-suite going forward, right? And so I think what you said, it is just so important to understand who's going to be the lead of that business, but also what is the dynamic with the co-founders. One question we ask for them both to be in the room, but also ask questions. We look at how they interact when questions are asked, who is talking over somebody else, like just really interpersonal skills that sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, because you're so deep into what it is that you are trying to solve, achieve, develop, you forget about just day-to-day respect of how you go or get perceived. Another thing I think is funding. Yes, absolutely, the number one request. And there are so many resources now. I think this is the generation that is going to change the pendulum of how the younger generation will look at this. I don't think that there's going to be continuous answers. The reason of this is that women are creating funds for themselves, just focused on women investments. Women of color are coming to the table to say, hey, I've got this. If you're not going to make space on your table, I'm going to create my own table. I think those are resources that absolutely people should explore, entrepreneurs. And then the third, which I think we forget, is on the onus is on us, right? We as individuals, we as people who are financially stable, ask questions about where your money is going, request how that money is being spent. So if you're going to be a limited partner in a fund, make sure the investment committee is diverse. Ask questions around how much of that investment is going to diverse entrepreneurs, how much of that investment is going to be allocated to women CEOs. You shouldn't be pushed over to decisions, right? It's your money. If you're going to a store to buy something with your money, you're going to choose what you like. It's the same sort of thing. And I think if we can start the movement from within where our money is going, it makes life a little bit easier for entrepreneurs who are trying to break through. And then the final point I'll make, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss, and for good reason, is that there's other entrepreneurs. Rely on them, collaborate, allow each other to help each other. Because I think that what happens is you feel like, oh my God, I'm so protective of what I'm going to do to experience what's happened, but you have the most similar story and the best way as entrepreneurs to deal with it. And it's something that we very much encourage at like Unreasonable in our program, is about the first 2 days of any program is just the CEOs, so you can bond and share stories, because that's such an easy phone call. Shit, I'm going through this. You know, what did you do? How can we do it? Brainstorm. I can't do that. I'm not in your shoes. Somebody else is. I think those are some tips from me.
We've experienced so many hurdles, but I'm just picking out the main ones. And when it comes to funding, you have to be careful who you take money from. Mm-hmm. And you have to be careful of what deals you accept. We were at the on the edge of one of our products being bought by a multinational corporation. And we were so excited, you know, we're ready to sign, and then we heard the deal, the offering, like, this doesn't sound good for us. And we walked away. And so that taught us a valuable lesson. It would have been easy for us to accept the crumbs that they were giving us. It would have been easy to accept the criteria that they wanted us to follow in order to get those crumbs. But I feel good to this day about walking away. So be careful about the offerings you accept, and all, like the old saying goes, all money is not good money. So just be careful in that aspect.
Thank you. So we had talked about co-founders and making sure you have the right balance, that dynamic. Can you talk about how you found the co-founders that you work with and what that working relationship was like?
I found some of the co-founders through the years, through networking, meeting people, and you think that you're going to get along with them. They're interested in what you want to do. You talk with them, and then they're interested in participating. But I haven't had a lot of luck in finding additional co-founders that would be as serious as I am about what I'm doing. So, and after our last go-round where we did disengage from co-founders, I'm even more particular now. Because you don't want to tell someone, I don't think I want to work with you now. So you got to be careful about that. and try to vet them as much as possible. But at the same time, you gotta kind of try them out to see if you can work with them, because there's no other way to know, right? But just be prepared that you may have to say, thank you very much, but we're not going forward.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna start with a caveat and then the actual co-founding story. Number one, I'm not married, but I feel like businesses or your co-founding relationship is a marriage because you're both financially tied to each other and you're both trying to create family legacy. So if one person's not picking up the slack, another family's gonna be affected by that. That's what I learned. So when we split, it literally felt like a divorce. I was just like, oh my God, what do I do? So there, but how I met my co-founder, it's actually interesting only because Priya was started, it had a different name at the time in 2015, but Priya was started by my other half, the co-founder. And then we were both working for another automotive marketing firm in Soto. And it's just so happened when he was starting his company, I pitched basically the same idea to General Motors, and they took it and they called it something else. So when he came to me with his idea, I was like, oh, I just sold that idea. It worked. Interesting. And then he realized that I love marketing, I love selling anything, I love networking. So after a year of consulting his own business, he brought me on as a co-founder. So from there, we took off. But that's when I learned co-founding relationships. And you mentioned earlier, or both of you actually mentioned earlier, how maybe the CEO is waiting for the glory and someone else has to do all the legwork. And actually one of our advisors at the time, Jillian Musick, who is still the co-founder of Moz, she basically told us, he's the idea person, but I'm the executor. It doesn't matter what idea you have, you need someone who executes on your ideas, because then you don't have a business. So when that was called out, that's when the strikes start to happen, because nothing was moving until it was executed. So the lesson I would give is, number one, understand their values. Understand what are their goals, and not the goals of the company, like, oh, this is our exit strategy, that's fine, but are you gonna put in just as much equal work as possible? And it's interesting only because he started the idea first, but I gave in equally the amount of work or even more at times. So that's something to look for, hence why I started with the marriage idea.
Thank you. So you all talked about how your difficulties with raising funding, and that being one of your major hurdles. For those of you who read Harvard Business Review, there was a recent article, actually it came out 2 days ago, and the article was Advice on Launching a Tech Startup When You're Not a White Man. And Cheryl Conti is the author of it, and she wrote, as a technologist, I'm one of the highest earners in my extended family. If I tried to pass the hat around when I launched my startup, it's more likely that by the end of the conversation, I'd have a list of people who owed me $20. So that's sort of that friends and family round that Denise referred to, where typically you start your funding with, hey, who from my family, who from my friends can give me those dollars, which if you're a person of color, a woman, you may not have that network in order to sort of go through that friends and family round, or you could, but you just have a list of people who may owe you money. So for Vicki and for Denise, when you first started to raise funding, Denise, I know you said your co-founder had already sort of been on his way, but even with your current organization, how did you start off with getting your first funding going?
Well, we bootstrapped at first, so we used all the funds we had. But every VC I've ever encountered, when we were pitching, that was always the first question. Have you raised 50? And it would make me laugh. Because like you said, we don't have that generational wealth where we can go ask mom and dad for 50K or 100K to get us started. So even with the angel funding, that just was happen chance. We just happened to meet someone who believed in us. They had no idea about the technology that we were creating, which a lot of times VC people will tell you that it's about the team. They don't really, I've been told, we don't care what the product is. We need to believe in the team, which I think, I don't know if I totally agree with that, but I think that the product is just as important as the team. But you have to, you just have to keep pushing until you find someone who, may believe in you and what you're doing enough to to give you some funds for that?
So for this situation, this is where networking actually did work in our favor. So first we did bootstrap. We used all of our own funds to pay for everything. And then afterwards we wanted to go into seed, but then we realized after we did our expense spreadsheet and everything we need to spend and the projections, we were like, oh God, we are not gonna be able to afford seed. And to me, seed is less than $1 million. I'm like, well, how are we gonna pay for this? We need a technologist. The technologist alone is gonna cost us this much. Therefore, we have nothing left to pay for anything. We were fortunate through networking. As a CMO at the time, that was my job. Every single day, I'm looking for an event, trying to network. Who has the money? And we were very fortunate at the time to fall with Madrona Ventures, who is local. And they were actually looking for an automotive startup to believe in. And all we had to do was just validate the product. It was, but we need to just finish up a few little contracts. But what happened was that, again, we split, but the thing is, we couldn't just have seed. We need to go straight to Series A because we were asking for 1.72. We needed that much out of the gate to really get going because of our connections at General Motors, at Ford, at BMW. Like, we had all the dealerships already and the brands behind us. So that's what we were doing. We were talking to a lot of local VCs, a lot of VCs in New York. Again, being from the East Coast, when I go home, I was like, I might as well just talk to some VCs and get it moving. But yeah, that's where we're at.
And Van, how can startups find you, or how do they network towards you?
So, and I'll answer that question in a minute. Just something about when you said about the team. The reason is with a startup, the actual technology is not completely tested in terms of revenue, and so it is. The team is so important because if you're going to put some money behind that, the technology or the team is what's going to take you to the next stage, right? So once there's revenue, and a lot of the companies we work in is around growth stage, team is yes or no. The CEO is of course very important because then there is enough money to create a new team. But that's the real difference in that. So I think there's a couple of things. So for us, you can find us pretty much on the website. We do growth stage. That's just the business model that we've taken. However, we self-select our company, so there's no application process. We are not an accelerator, but we start looking at companies very early on, just to look at where their trajectory is, and it tells us a lot about the story. Where the company's gone, the movements in the founders, for example, tells a big story as well. But there are a lot of resources right now. There are not enough resources, in particular for female CEOs. I absolutely agree. But something to be really mindful of course, grants is one thing. Friends and families, if you have it, but also the network that you come across through school. And this is when I speak to especially young women who are going into college and school, is so much about college is not what you're going to learn in that classroom. It is about the people that you are going to meet and surround yourselves with, right? So I'm super fortunate, I get it. I have friends, in fact, they flew in from London today, 26 years of friendship. And I guarantee you anybody will tell me the truth, but they're also my sounding board. They're also my network. They're also the ones who are going to make a recommendation in their own network as they proceed through their lives. So many of those relationships start so much earlier on than before you start the business. Secondly, in terms of, in particular, sort of startups, is again, before you spend the money, and there's so much of it, like you believe in your own product and there's a desperation about what you need, is one, think about the plan as to where this business is going, how there are a lot of resources now for free office space, free advice, free mentoring, etc. Use those resources to develop, both female, male, they're willing to give it. What you said, learning, right? I mean, you have to learn so much about a business, and probably some of the stuff you learned through going to free law firm sessions, etc., made you say, hey, I'm not taking that deal, that's not good for me. You have to learn every aspect of it, free resources again. LinkedIn, they do really, really good free programs online and learning, and so many others do it. College courses. You know, if you call up a professor, go to a college and say, hey, I'd just like to sit in on this. Very few colleges say no to that, you know, for one or two of those things. Those are all like before you even go for money and start spending money that just use those resources. And then finally, when you think about a board, your advisors, right? Be very, very strategic, very choosy about who that person is going to be. Make sure they're strategic in what they can do for you as a company, the doors they can open for you, and how aligned they can be, because that's where some of the initial sort of money and doors get opened. And then, one more. In terms of, again, then who your first investors are as well. It's really hard to say no to money, but the wrong money, as you had mentioned, will get you into a lot of trouble. And later on, when you do need that Series A, and the Series A investor comes in and is like, what the hell, I gotta clean up our cap table, it's a deterrent, right? Because you spend so much time and money trying to get rid of co-founders, equity you've given away, stuff. Don't promise stuff. Like, let's, you know, figure this out as the company grows. So those are just some of the things that we think, you know, you should think about it. And then in particular for females, reach out to the female-run funds, right? Very few of them will turn you away for a phone call. I mean, don't go for the CEO, right? Let's start with an analyst and say, hey, can you put me in touch with somebody? Because obviously the CEO is doing things like strategizing over the business, but there are definitely things like that. Plum Alley is one, which is female run. They do a lot of events. They do events for their members, and as an entrepreneur, if you're like, hey, I just want to learn, definitely, I think there's people that you can learn for. So I think start with those resources as well, and then. Yeah.
I know this might not be like the traditional or conventional path that you're supposed to take, but I did a campaign one time where I looked up 100 VCs and I made sure that what we were doing aligned with the types of companies that they invested in, and I bought some nice letterhead, stationery, big envelopes, and I mailed them all. And out of that 100, I had 20 responses, and out of those 20 responses, 2 said, they looked at our pitch deck and they said, come back to us. So I still have those 2 in my pocket that I'll be going back to. But sometimes you have to really think creatively, because if you don't know anyone, how are you going to make those connections? So you might not want to try the route I took, but you might want to think creatively about how to go about that.
I just want to concur with that, because that's basically what I did as well. The same idea, like I remember, all right, I love personal stories. So the same idea when I was applying for my first jobs or even my first internships, like for instance, so go back to school. Your school, this is my purview. School is not there to learn, you're there to make connections. Honestly, a lot of people are like, yeah, I have this paper, I'm gonna succeed in life. No, you need to make connections. And for me, my first, well, I'm still doing it actually, my first dream and my current dream, I love fashion. So being from New Jersey and wanting to get into Manhattan, I'm like, how can I get there being first-gen American, 0 contacts in these top magazines, what can I do? So, everyone knows, what's that movie? Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. How she had her pink resume and perfumed it. Mine wasn't pink, it was linen. I had like the 80% linen cotton resume. Like my mother, she spent money on this paper. And then we printed it perfectly, and yes, I sprayed perfume on it. And then I sent it to all the magazines that I wanted. I got them. So that's awesome. But then I knew the work started there. I'm like, okay, I'm in the door, now let's make some more networks, let's connect these people, let's get going. So with that is the same idea when, again, I did pivot, but when I was looking for funds and talking to VCs, I did not send them any scented paper, but what I did was, we hired a graphic designer. So we all know that beauty sells, or controversially, sex sells. So when it came to our pitch deck, we saw what the competitions were doing. A lot of the white male counterparts, their pitch deck, oh Lord. Let's just say it's not traditional PowerPoint where it's grammatically correct and it flows and all the information you need is there. What we did was, it was beautifully designed, top to bottom. So the prettier it is, I'm telling you, you're gonna get in the door. Because they're gonna realize, ooh, they're so organized. Everything's pretty and together, and they have a color scheme, and they know they're branding for their company. So that's what we did. We made everything look so designed. So our website, heavily designed, our pitch, everything that every asset was never sent out without our designer touching it. Like, it was not happening. So for us, that worked. So similar idea with your resume, we did it for our pitch deck. And the same thing for I'm missing a document. What's the document you said on top of the pitch deck, which is your
term sheet.
Thank you, your term sheet. So that too was also, everything was heavily designed. Even if it didn't need to be, I made it pretty. We were not playing games. So I recommend that just hire a designer. You probably have designer friends. Just make sure everything's pretty. You're gonna keep it anyways, so why not?
Just add to one thing, right? So, and this is for you as a person as well as obviously for entrepreneurs, is a 3-line elevator pitch, right? So every time, doesn't matter where you are, you could be in the grocery store, you could be something, you see somebody who's having a conversation, say your elevator pitch, because you have no idea who that person is, you know, and I have one sometimes about things that I am doing to advance the name for Unreasonable, and I'm sure most people are like, oh God, here she goes. But it's a great story, right? How many people have got a company called Unreasonable? Not that many. Make sure you have that and it's consistent for your own business, but also for yourself, right? So much of what we do today, and particularly as women and women of color, is about selling ourselves, and we shouldn't be shy to what we bring to the table.
And that's actually a great segue. Is there anything that you all felt that you did as a Black female founder when you were approaching VCs, co-founders, anything that one, uniquely positioned you, and two, maybe how you changed your approach based on being a woman or a person of color?
I can start. Okay, I like to show out, honestly. I was like, I don't know how else to put this. So again, coming from the East Coast and then realizing that, okay, we're building a tech-based company in Seattle, look at your competition again. Most of my competition in the automotive space are all male. How many women do you know in automotive? Not many. And then how many women of color do you know in automotive? Not many. And then how many women that are Latina in automotive? Not many. So I already knew I was breaking down walls just walking into these spaces. I'm like, hey, I'm Denise Aguilar. Like, I just realized if I try to act like them, it's not going to work, because that's not my story. I'm not being authentic to myself. What I realized is the more authentic I am, even if I'm inappropriate, it worked, because they remembered my name, they remembered the company, they remembered how everything was designed. I purposely made sure that my outfits were not over the top, but just not a hoodie. I wore a heel, I threw on some makeup, I made sure I showered. Like these little things, and I'm not even kidding. How many people in tech do you know that don't shower at work? Yeah, exactly. So these little things, and then even my co-founder, like as a male, he also believed, it's okay, I can wear a hoodie, it's fine, all these men are doing the same thing. Absolutely not. You are my co-founder, we are on the same page. So make sure you both are dressed well. We will coordinate colors. I'll pick out his outfits. So like, you're wearing this, because it goes with what I'm wearing. All right, so the story. The same thing with practicing your elevator pitch. We had the literal 30-second elevator pitch, like when you're in the elevator, and then we had the 2 to 3 minute one, and then we have like a 5 to 10 minute one if we really needed to go into the story deeper. But honestly, what helped me the most is my background. So always telling the story of, I'm first gen, Colombian, I traveled, we do these things. He's Cameroonian, he traveled, lived in France, now we're here. So you might get tired of your own story, but that story is what's gonna set you apart from everyone else, because here's what, no one else is like you. You are literally unique. So find what makes you the most unique, monetize that story, and sell it, because you want your business to succeed. So, and I can see everyone in this crowd, you all are beautiful and very unique. Let's use that story.
I think for me as a baby boomer, people don't expect a baby boomer to be working on a startup. And so I think there's a bias, and not only ageism, but also being a woman, and a woman of color, being a Black woman. I find that there's a tendency, if you are a Black woman or woman of color and you're starting a business, and if it's not solving some societal ill that's afflicting us all, then you're not taken seriously about just wanting to make money, or just wanting to create something that may create jobs for others. So that bugs me, and I don't know if I've overcome that because of the interactions that I still have with some people, that there's still the expectations like, no, I don't have the solution to the water problem. You know, I just want to just make the software that's going to do X, Y, Z. And so overcoming that expectation of what you're supposed to be doing because you're a certain age is what I like to bump up against, and hopefully will bust that door down.
So both of our founders are on their second, third, fourth iteration or actual startup. Can you walk us through, how you identify what your idea will be? Some of our members are sort of in that ideation phase, and they're thinking, is this even a startup idea? Will this work? Should I move forward with it? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Come on. Okay, so I don't know why this keeps coming in my head. So literally today, I was watching a show called Explained on Netflix, and one of the episodes was called, it is called Billionaires. Now, with billionaires, it's such a good episode, but with billionaires, they talked about most billionaires, besides the ones that were born with silver spoon, they solved a problem. So the first thing I would have you think is, what you are creating, is it going to solve a problem? So think about it this way, are you creating a company out of vanity, ego, or actually trying to help people? Because if the goal is to really make some money, then you're helping people. So for us, with Priya, it was about helping people be able to purchase a car efficiently, and specifically for people of color, where we're charged more, where we are denied credits or just denied period in lieu of cash, where we are always upsold or we don't get the car that we want. And I always use the story of my mother where she still has a Corolla, but she keeps wanting to buy a BMW, but it doesn't happen because they keep overcharging her for whatever it is. So the goal was to solve that problem and also help people who don't have access to vehicles, say in the Midwest, where if they need to take the bus or the infrastructure is dying, they have no way to even get that vehicle so that they can get to a job that can create family legacy. So that's the story. So whatever you're trying to build, the first thought is, what are you solving? Is it gonna help the masses? And then look at the market. What are the percentages? Who are you trying to target? Does that target market have X, Y amount of dollars? Like, look at the census. The census is great because it has all the information there. You could look at age range, you could look at salary, you could look at almost anything. So you could take that information, create pie charts, and then just look at this full scope. Like, oh, this market has money, this market has a need. I'm going to create a product that will solve this need. All right, let's go, build it. So that's the advice I would give. Just solve a problem, find it.
I diverge a little bit from that. Yes, I agree with you, but I diverge a little bit. Solving problems, yes, that's important. But if you are able to create something that's, as a lot of coders say, is really, really cool, it doesn't have to solve a problem. It just has to be cooler than the rest of the stuff that's out there. I always think of Apple. Did they really solve a problem? They just made some really cool stuff that was better than all the other stuff that was out there. And so solving problems, yes, very important. But if you can think of something that's cooler than everything else that's out there, do that as well.
And now that you're on your third, fourth, what do you feel like you know this time around that you didn't know when you initially started out?
Everything.
Or how's your even approach different this time around now that you're going in?
My approach is different now because of the knowledge that I've gained from all, I don't like to call them failures because, you know, people are always saying, well, you learn from failure. I don't like that thought process.
Or fail up.
Yeah, I like fail up. All the fail ups, I took notes. And so I know what not to do now, but you also have a knowledge base. You know when somebody's trying to trick you. You know when they're just trying to get your money, because we wasted a lot of money paying different professionals for different things, thousands over here, thousands over there. What did we get? Nothing. And so you're just better, you're able to make better decisions about what decisions you need to make and what people you need to align yourself with.
Yeah, so back to books. I love this author, John C. Maxwell. He talks about, one of his books is called Sometimes You Win and Sometimes You Learn. I don't believe that we ever lose. And with that in mind, what have I learned? A lot, but at the same time, I don't think I'll change anything. So what has changed over the time is the network itself. So when I first started my very, very, very baby venture back in New York, it was an event planning company called Complete. I did one wedding, that was wild. I realized very quickly, this is not the path because it's very hands-on, it's very transactional. If you're trying to make money, then you need to scale it. So with that in mind, I built out my network, and I think it exploded even more in Seattle. So because of that network, that's why the fashion business is thriving even further, because there's so many people out here that I know personally that don't want to think about clothes. So I'm like, yeah, I'm here, let's go, let's do this. So I think the lesson here is, and I say this all the time actually, your network is dependent on your net worth. So you have to grow your network if you want more money.
And then is there something you see a difference between sort of that the baby founder who's coming through the door and those who are more experienced? Like what's the skill set or what's the difference? Obviously there's a confidence piece there, but what else is there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Passion is one of them, right? Because when you are an entrepreneur starting out, and then there's all these struggles that, you know, both the entrepreneurs have talked about here, you quickly lose your passion. And I think you have to figure out a way to go back to why you started that company and the passion that led you to go through these difficult times. Empathy, I think and the empathy is not only obviously empathetic to yourself because shit, you're doing something great, or about to, it's about who there is and who else is on the journey, right? Some of the times, and we watch a lot of these entrepreneurs, that we turn people down is because there's a lot of I, and we is always greater than I. And I think that if you can come across that, you'll get other people in your journey as well. And it's a lot, you know, people think, well, those are just personal things, but it goes in so many different ways that will also, when you are networking, it helps, right? So people are, I've found, especially in this new job, and I'll give an example, right? A lot of people are coming to me and they're like, okay, you hand out money, which is how my mom describes my job to her friends. Okay, I do not give out money, right? Number one. But people want to know me, not for me and not for my story. They want to know me because they feel they can get somewhere. And so I think what you were saying, right, that networking is not always helpful, but from another side, it's just like, okay, get to know me. I am absolutely, and so many other people are, of course, willing to help and open networks, but there has to be a trust as well. You know, are you values aligned? What is it that we can each do together? And then for entrepreneurs, and I say this when I also speak to sort of my funding community as well, let's collaborate, right? Why is this a competition? We're all going in the same direction. There's a lot of money out there, and if we can open our own networks, if you got an investment in something and you're like, hey, actually, there's a great person that I know who's a female CEO, I think you should talk to her, right? The funders have pretty large checks to write, and it doesn't mean that each company is a competition. It also leads, and we've seen a live version of this happening right now in one of our companies, is that we put two competitive CEOs together for a reason. We interviewed them a lot. We didn't tell them about each other, brought them to a program. They're going to a joint venture now. And that has expanded both their networks, but also meant that the funders in each of them are willing to write the checks that are greater, and they don't have to go fundraising, right? So let's help each other. I think that is so important. And it's not a female thing, it's not a male thing, right? Everybody has to be at the table. The final thing that is, I think, it's not a turn-off, but I think that we forget sometimes, as a female, we bring so much to the table, right? We are the masters of multitasking. We have a lot of skills. We don't need to be a male counterpart in the same way as a male counterpart doesn't need to be women. There is space for both of us. If we can together work at this together and find people who are aligned and supportive of each other, I think we will change the trajectory for the younger generation who are becoming entrepreneurs.
No, you just reminded me, again, 2 more books. This book called Mindset, I believe it's by Carol Dweck. Yes. And then another book, Start with the Why, Simon Sinek. Because, again, every business picture is going to drain you, probably financially, as well as emotionally. So with the emotional side, you need to have a positive mindset, or at least a go-getter mindset. And remember that scarcity is fear. Scarcity is not real. There's so much out there. There's like literally so much out there. So as long as you're always thinking of opportunities and abundance, it will come to you. So there.
So our founders out here, they're reading books, they're going to workshops, they're still trying to grow their business, they're doing all the things, which it seems like there is a lot of stuff that's on your plate, along with many of the things that, you know, women have, families, their job, their interest, volunteering. How did you all balance it all? How did you juggle it all, maybe I should say? Where did your priorities start?
In my case, my millennial kids, we have 3, are all gone, so I didn't have the kid component. It's important that if you are in a relationship, that you have a supportive partner. I'm very lucky that my co-founder is also my husband, but in the beginning, he didn't respect me very early on in business. And we just had this conversation last night. Well, I didn't know anything about business. He was from an entrepreneurial family. He knew about business operations. I had to learn. But I'm very dedicated about what I do. So as I learned about business, then we began to develop a relationship where our strengths, we were leaning towards what those strengths were. Now he's a technology professional, so he had to take care of that area, but I did everything else. So that meant I had to know about marketing, I had to know about finance, I had to know all these things. I'm not doing them all myself, but if I go talk to an accountant, I want to be able to know what type of revenue recognition software are you going to be using so that you're not taken advantage of. So I think having a partner who is supportive, who doesn't feel threatened by what you're doing, is very important to being able to balance everything, and also being able to jump in, because it's not always 50-50. So sometimes somebody's doing 90% of whatever it is, and you just have to be willing to do that when you have a partner, and when you have someone who's working with you instead of against you. That is what helps carry everything forward.
Okay, so I might be saying something controversial. I do not believe in work-life balance. I don't think that's a thing. I think that's a facade. And that's why I love entrepreneurship, because you at least get to bring your life into your business. So hopefully you are going to build something that is a part of you. Yeah, I really don't believe in that at all. So in terms of balancing everything, calendars. I believe in calendars. There's not a calendar, it doesn't exist. And a lot of my friends who are in the room have heard that spiel from me daily. Did you know what's the best? It's on the calendar, it doesn't exist. So that, and as well as reminders, use all the apps, they're useful. I love a good Apple Watch. Apple has changed my life. I'm keeping on track of everything. But I don't know, it's just to go back to the original question, I can't conceptualize anything because I truly do not believe that is a thing. And there's so many books out there like, how to balance your life. I'm like, no, that's impossible. So if anything, for me, it's about prioritization. Figure out what is the most important to you. Like pick like 5 things and just stick to that until you find success. So for me, I prioritize my life by, unfortunately, waking up every day. But for the most part, waking up at 4:45 I lied. 4:45 to run at 5:30, and then start working at 8, and then that's my day job, and then stop working at like 4 to work on all of my other businesses, and then go to sleep by like midnight, and then just rinse and repeat. So discipline, that's my work-life balance. It's just figure out what do I prioritize in my life, what is the most important? Is it faith, is it fitness, is it family? What is it? Figure that out, put it on the calendar, and then stick to that until you get success.
I think that's a really good point, Denise, prioritization, because that can change daily.
Yeah.
And I think being flexible, everything now is about being agile, and I'm a Scrum Master, and I've always lived an agile life, so it's very easy for me. So I think that you have to be very flexible and yes, you can have a very regimented schedule, but without that flexibility to be like, oh gosh, I need to do this today instead of that, I think is what makes things flow. Because if you're too rigid, you're gonna have a hard time dealing with unexpected things that pop up. So I would say that prioritization is really important.
Vin, are there things that you maybe see that founders don't prioritize, maybe in the beginning?
Yeah, so I think firstly, I think a little bit of both, but on work-life balance, the one thing I won't do is read work-life balance books. The reason being is that work-life balance to me is probably very different to you and to you, right? What I find is important and where I kind of draw the categories, so it's a very personal thing, and so those are one books that I will not buy, but yeah, so a little bit of both. I think when entrepreneurs forget about themselves and their self-growth, it is very, very clear when they are trying to, not so much in the pitch because you can bluff your way, but when funders are trying to get to know those entrepreneurs, it becomes very clear when they've given up on themselves. And I think that for entrepreneurs, not the greatest, but one of the advice that I give them is create a circle of trust and balance. And that trust and balance can be people, can be what you do, can be your self-reflection from meditation to running, and stick to it, right? Make that a priority, because without you, there is no business.
This speaks to balance. One of the exercise for me is what does it. I am a indoor cycle person, and I go once a week, and that resets me. And to be my age, to be in the room with the loud music in the dark, and for 45 minutes, I don't have to think about anything. That is what resets me for the next week. So I would say to balance yourself, find something that you love to do. It doesn't have to be spin class, but something that you love to do, like you were saying, to help balance you. I think that helps me the most, because I could have had a very frustrating week, but then when I hit that room on that Sunday, I come out, I can do anything on Monday, right? So I think that's a really big part of having a balanced life, is finding that one thing that you really enjoy doing, and it's just for you. It's not for your partner, it's not for your kids, it's not for your mom, anyway. It's being selfish, because as women, we have a hard time doing for ourselves. I still get nervous if I just do something just for myself, right? So I would say for women, we have to take a little bit of time just for ourselves and be okay with that.
And just to piggyback off of what you just said, because that reminded me of the why. So my grandmother is the first one to migrate to the United States, and I saw her work still to the bone. She does not put any time to herself. So having that as a model, I realized I'm gonna have to pivot if I want to at least survive. So again, prioritizing, whether it's meditation, running, exercise, whatever it is, but put it at the top of your list, because if not, you're not gonna be available to anybody.
So for those who are in the audience and thinking of maybe they are not quite started, are there folks that you'd say, you know what, this isn't for you? Or maybe reasons why people shouldn't get into this? And we all want you to become the next $1 billion founder, so.
Again, I might say something controversial.
Go ahead.
We live in the United States, and we live in a capitalist society. We have the power of free enterprise. I believe everyone is made for entrepreneurship. It doesn't mean it needs to be the same type of business for everyone, but I truly believe we are in this country for a reason. So again, being first gen, you see so much. You do not have the same opportunities in South America at all. So why not take this advantage? Why not try to change your family legacy? Why not? What's the worst that's gonna happen? You fail, okay, try again. You're gonna keep learning and learning and learning. So I fully believe this is for everyone. So that's all I have to say, but we're in a free enterprise. Let's go.
I'm sorry.
No, please. I'm gonna counter that a little bit, and I think that, yes, I think, I've been in America 10 years, so this is all very new to me as well. But if you are not the person to do hard work, entrepreneurship is not for you, right? It is absolutely a struggle. And I work really hard, but the other reason I think, so I wouldn't be an entrepreneur, and that's because I think I would just be like, oh my God, but why can't I do it this way, and I'd be constantly thinking of something else, and never get there. If you are also not you're the person who's going to be like, it needs to be 100% to where I want it to be before I put it out in the market, also not for you. Because your 100% is very different from the person on the outside who's either buying the product, using the product, or funding the product. So those two things, just think about it, both of which can be overcome and you can learn, and which goes to a point that yes, you can teach yourself to be an entrepreneur, but be honest with yourself before you start out on this mission.
I have 2 points to make. One is if you're not comfortable with chaos and uncertainty, don't do it. Because there's so many days you don't know. You just don't know. And so people who like a very regimented life, who need to know where their money's gonna come from all the time, and they need to know what their day's gonna be like all the time, don't do it. Secondly, speaking to what you were talking about, putting out your product when it's not 100%, I disagree with that a little bit, particularly as a Black woman. For us, the standard is always higher. So a young white male, he can put out a product that's not halfway. He might just have it written on a napkin and get the money. We have to make sure our stuff is as close to 100% as possible. Because if not, right now our product is MVP, it's minimal viable product. It's actually more than that. But I want it to be better than that before I come to someone like you, because I know in general, I'm going to be judged differently. So I don't totally agree with putting things out there that are not as close to you wanting it to be.
Thank you for that. So I mean, I guess there's that balance between the 100% and,
Yes.
and what's perfect. What's the point that you say, okay, now I think it's ready for prime time, both maybe in the early stage of the idea, as well as like, now I'm going to—
If I want to use it.
Yeah, okay.
If I want to use it, then it's ready. If I don't want to use it, I'm not going to put it out for anybody else to try to use it. So it has to be good to me. And if I'm saying, and working with my co-founder who does all the programming, I drive him crazy because I'm always thinking of the product from the user's perspective. I hate the word user, customer's perspective. I'm thinking of why does the customer have to click 2 times to do that? Why can't they do it once? And I won't let go of those kinds of things until it is easy, till it's seamless, until the product is fun to use. So I have to be satisfied. If I'm satisfied, then I'll feel like, yes, it's ready.
I see.
Yes, yes, but that's also relative.
Yes.
Yes. So for me, as long as it works. So we just wanted to get something out. Also the VCs, that's all they wanted to see. They were like, we don't want something perfect, we just want to see something. We're like, okay, here's Shopify, here's Squarespace. Okay, we did it. There's a car with a price. You can click on it. The CTA works. Something's functioning. So for me, it was just more like a 20% because that's all they wanted to see before we could actually have serious talks about money. But to go back to, because it kind of connects together with entrepreneurship and is it for everyone, and the 20% viable product and blah, 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 blah. If we don't want chaos, then how do we live? Because if you think about it, our jobs are not secure, meaning that our boss can fire us any day. For instance, today in the news, I think it was General Motors, GE froze 20,000 pensions. Pensions! So those people were probably thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna have my monies when I'm done. Oh no, it's frozen, what do you do now? So for me, it's more like, you don't have security no matter what. So you might as well grab life by the horns and try to build something on the side or full time, because you're going to go through chaos regardless. Whether your 401k goes down, whether the stock market goes down, whether Social Security disappears, it's chaos. So why not do something that will hopefully navigate you through the chaos?
I believe in managed chaos.
Manage chaos. Yes, manage chaos with the calendar.
So we have some of our members who maybe they aren't going to follow the entrepreneur path, but they might join a startup. So they might be, an employee for one of your companies. And you said hiring, that's one of the pitfalls that you had. So what type of employee would you be looking for in terms of your startup?
Well, I am a future of work enthusiast, and I'm very concerned being in technology about the future of technology and how people are being displaced now. And it's going to get even worse. So if I'm to hire someone, I want to make sure that I'm not just hiring them just to do a job, because we're going to have to find other ways to fulfill ourselves when all the robots, AI takes over. What will we do, So I will look at them as co-founders, and I will want to see or recognize they don't have to have a lot of experience. If you're enthusiastic, if you are authentic, I would want to give that person a chance. It doesn't matter how much experience you've had. I've met very experienced people who were not impressive. So giving people a chance is very important, and people can always learn what you need them to learn. So I always want to look at people with a fresh perspective and not with expectations according to some checklist that they're supposed to have.
Agreed. So when I was hiring for Priya, my first thought was, I don't know if it's called reverse racism, but I just wanted to make sure I hired anyone but white, unfortunately, for those roles, because again, the automotive industry is almost one type. And same thing with technology. I had to always think, is their role pertinent? Will it be replaced one day or not? And so I tried to hire as slowly as possible. Obviously there were mistakes, but will their role last throughout? And whoever we hired in the beginning of the startup years, essentially my vision for them was, you're going to be in the C-suite anyways. So let's get you to learn your role, but then also let's build up your leadership skills, because you're going to manage a team. My creative director, you're gonna be the creative director, so you're gonna have people. Or the marketing person, you're going to be the CMO, because actually my goal was not to be the CMO. I wanted to build the infrastructure, hire someone else, build them up, so that I can step away. Because in the end, your business is an asset, so unless you want to run your business all your life, or do you want someone else to work your business while you receive all the checks in the end? So that was my mindset. Everyone can learn, and I like to hire people who not exactly have done the job for 20 some odd years or even studied in college, because I believe a lot of skills are transferable. And especially with startups, a lot of younger people are more risk averse. That's what I'm looking for. So they're more open to trying new things and working long hours to build an idea or build a dream. So that was my vision. My vision was to hire people who just honestly just show me your grit. I just want to know you're not gonna quit. Are you gonna get this done? And then are you willing to be a leader? So I think that's everything I have to say for that.
And you've talked about the team and how that balance is. How deep do you look into, beyond the co-founders of the organization?
It depends sort of where and how intricate that team is, right? So for Unreasonable, where we look for anything we do and values aligned, right? So we definitely, one of our values is no assholes. We take that from not only just our team members, very seriously, the CEOs, but also the mentors that we bring to the table, right? It's got to be across the board. The other thing is global identity. And that means so much to so many different people. But the point about global identity is not that, hey, we're just trying to check some boxes for numbers. It is that different people bring different opinions and different visions to the table, right? You haven't lived my life in the same way I've lived your life. Respect the fact that I bring something else differently to the table. Again, across the board, we've known to not let people through the programs because of that. From our own hiring perspective as well, if anybody's applied for a job at Unreasonable, we take a really long time. We just hired somebody who was an analyst in a bank. That would have been a 2-week process. Ours was a 6-week process because it is a completely blind process until they do a 2-hour deep dive with me if it's in my team, which is the first time I see that person. So we don't get resumes. We use a tool called Applied. Of course, for legal reasons and everything else that the HR person does, but we don't. And then we have a spectrum of the team who interviews them at some point or the other. And then finally, with whoever the lead is in the team, they do a 2-hour deep dive where we talk to them on a video call or in person. And I think that sort of really weeds through so much of the difficulties that I think we come across in employees, but potentially also co-founders in the C-suite. So yeah, if anybody's applied, it's not that we're lazy. We have a process, it takes a long time, but I think that's really important, right? And then again, just for each of you, create values that are around what you believe in, and your team should also buy into that, and it's a 2-way thing as well. So.
Thank you. So we're almost at time, and I want to make sure that we leave time for questions for the audience. So I guess from our panelists, my last question for you is, what's next for you and your organization, and what gives you hope for women of color who want to start the next billion-dollar business?
So what's next for me? I mentioned, so one of the key goals for 2020 is going to be raising our first global fund, which we hope to be around 250 to 300 million as a co-investment vehicle. And so the idea is to drive $1 billion with the lead investors into impact across the world. The reason I took this job, and I'm looking at my friend Junior because we had really long conversations about this, and leaving a super successful career to do this, is because I had buy-in from the CEO that, one, we could have a fund that is 20% allocated to just female CEOs. We will not touch that money for anybody else but CEOs who are female or founders who are female, right? Sometimes it can be different. Secondly, is to allow me to raise a fund that is created with global LPs. So I want an LP base that is global, because those people will sit on my advisory board. And when an investment committee looks like the spectrum of entrepreneurs that are coming to the table, the shift of where that money comes changes. So that's what my hope is. And then obviously to drive money to the entrepreneurs as well. So fingers crossed.
So next moves. I'm just really excited that there's so many people who are looking to monetize their lifestyle. So with We Steer and Denise by Design, I'm basically using Fortune 100 companies so that we're able to monetize our own spending. Like, we're gonna spend money anyway, so why not figure out a way to make money off your money? It doesn't always take money to make money, but we do spend money daily, so why not try to get that back? And at the same time, what gives me the greatest hope ever is that it is so much cheaper to start a business today compared to, even though I'm born in the late 80s, but in the 80s, the 90s, or even the early 2000s. So with that in mind, and again, we know the statistics out there, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but so many women of color are building businesses at the most rapid rates, and that gives me hope and so much joy, because we're changing the face. First we're the culture makers, and now we're about to be culture and business makers. And you're gonna see us in every single vertical, and I cannot wait to see women in automotive, in space, in biotech, in every single vertical, and being fabulous at the same time. So that gives me hope. The internet has helped a lot of industries and people, and I'm very happy to see, especially through Instagram actually, that a lot of women of color are understanding that there's ways to monetize their own spending, but also their lifestyles to create legacies.
I'm just very excited about what's going on with Black women, period, because being the most educated in the country, having been the group that have started the most businesses recently, that's very exciting to me. And that also encourages me every day. And just in women of color in general. what we're working on right now, the platform that we've been developing for the last few years, we've taken a pivot with this third startup because of an opportunity that's been presented to us. We see a gap in the market, and our new venture involves changing the customer experience for services that we all need, and that's clean clothes. So we're going to blend together humans and robots and other technologies in the way that our clothes are cleaned. And that's all I want to say about it right now.
Stay tuned. Thank you. We just give our. Do you have any questions from the audience?
I can talk about it. Yeah. You guys touched on it a little bit earlier when you guys were kind of like talking about like two things you talked about, like what is entrepreneurship for everybody, and then also you guys talked about like some of you were on your third or fourth iterations of your startups. But I was curious, kind of, how did you decide to kind of like, I'm a former entrepreneur, but I'm kind of in this phase where I think I'm like, once bitten, twice shy, and so I'm kind of hesitant about making that next step to kind of like start entrepreneurship again. What was the time period between your iterations of your different startups, and how long was like the longest you went without like not being an entrepreneur, and like how did you kind of jump back into it after failing out?
So I'll repeat the question quickly for those who couldn't hear. How long did they go between their iterations of their startups, and for how long were they in that period where they were an entrepreneur?
I'm pretty lucky in that my co-founder programs, so he'll create a platform and he'll say, what can we do with this? And then I think about how we're going to develop, how we build that out, how we market it. I do all the research to see who we could sell it to, that kind of thing. So I don't start from scratch myself. I kind of just pick off from what he's done. But in terms of how long in between, if something hasn't worked, you have to be willing to let it go at some point, after some point, and make a pivot and not be afraid to make that change. So it depends. Sometimes it's been a year, 2 years. Sometimes you go back into the workforce while you're percolating other things, and then you say, see ya, and you quit, and then you go back to what you want to do. So I don't think there's any one way to do it, and you just do it the way it makes you most comfortable. And don't be scared. I don't care if you have to start 10 times. I mean, I have other things that I want to do too that I'm waiting, that are waiting in the wings. So my backup plan businesses, if this doesn't work, then I have something else that I want to do, or something that you may be really passionate about, that you really love, and you think of a way that you could do it differently, put a different spin on it. That could be one way that you get to where you want to go as well.
So I remember you're talking about like don't accept bad money.
Yes.
But what about that good money? Like, what does that look like? Like, who's got the good money? And like,
Where do we find good money?
Where do I find the good money? And like, how do they influence? Do they have like? Do people try to influence you when you take money?
Oh yeah. Because good money will feel good. Like, I'm very much about energy.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to convince me to take your money, but the terms don't look good for me, and you want me to jump through a bunch of hoops before I get this money, and it's not on the face of my product and my team, that's not what you're accepting. It needs to feel right in your gut. I'm very much about a woman's intuition about things. And we know when something's wrong. We just have that thing about us. Trust that thing, because most of the time you're gonna be right. But if those terms are not fair, and I know fair is relative too. Yes, investors want to get, one of the most difficult things about taking the money is that if you're trying to do a startup, most investors will tell you they want their money back within a year. They may want 10 million in a year. If you commit to that, you better make sure you can really deliver on that, You want to make sure it's reasonable, it's fair to both parties as much as you possibly can be, and that you're not committing to something that you can't deliver on just because you want the money. It's very difficult not to take the money. You know, I mean, even today, the deal that we walked away from, I still sometimes I'm like, dang, if we had taken that money, but it would have been horrible, you know, and people told us we were naive for not taking it. And so you just need to make sure that it's the right deal for you, that you feel comfortable doing that. And where is the good money? I'm still looking for that good money. I know it's out there. People tell me all the time, there's lots of money out here. So I'm still trying to find that good money.
To piggyback off that, because your intuition is definitely strong, research. So, Better Business Bureau, the FTC. Here's a good example. We just found out recently in SoulCycle. Are you spinning a SoulCycle?
I used to.
Yeah, I used to. So we found out recently, we the world, that I don't know if they got their money, who knows? But the point is, they're associated with other politicians. Some people may support that politician, others don't. So I stopped going to SoulCycle, same idea. So if the money's coming from, I stopped going. I'm not going. Oh, I canceled quick. I was like, oh, canceled. But look at where their money's coming from. For instance, General Motors or Ford wanted to buy us pretty early. And we realized, hold on, if they buy us, we already know we cannot scale this to every single automotive brand because GM bought us, so it has to be only GM, or Ford bought us, so it's only Ford. So you have to think about what are their intentions? What do they want from you? And again, read the terms and conditions too. So if you are gonna owe $10 million a year, I would say, no, that's a lot in 1 year. But yeah, look at where the money's coming from, look online, and if you have advisors or mentors that are well connected, talk to them because they're probably friends of them somehow, and you can find that on LinkedIn. You can just go into their contacts and see who knows who.
I just want to speak a little bit to the SoulCycle situation because there's so many entities that we have to pay our money to nowadays, and things are so incestuous that it's really hard to know where they're getting the money from and who they're giving the money to. But when something is so personal, like cycling was for me, that was where I had to draw the line. I had to draw the line at those things where there are other options out there. Sometimes your landlord may not be the type of person who lines up with your values and with your beliefs, but you gotta live there. So you can't really like quit the landlord at that moment. But yes, being selective about who you get the money from and where they're getting their money from is very important.
The landlord is the United States.
In the red sweater.
Thank you. So this is a question for all the panelists. Denise, I really liked how you said, don't go into the maze alone and seek mentorship. So I'd love to understand from all the panelists how you nurture your longest lasting mentorship relationships. Any advice you can give for folks in the room?
Great question.
So how you nurtured your
Longest lasting
mentorship.
relationships. Yep. As in getting advice and being a mentor, and so both sides of the mentorship relationship.
For me, so much is about trust, but also friendship, right? A mentorship or some of this thing about taking money and stuff, it's all about relationship, especially, and what you build, but it can't be a one-way street, right? And I think part of it is understanding that, but also as you grow through that mentorship and as you grow through your career, we hear the word paid forward. I think that's super important as well. So for me, for when I mentor other people, I actually watch what they also do for maybe somebody who's younger than them, etc. I think those have been some of my longest mentorship. I'm fortunate to have an incredibly supportive husband who has done a lot more than me. He's a little bit older than me, and definitely I rely on him more because he doesn't want anything from me in that sense. And then I keep talking about my circle of trust as well, right? And that for me is my friends and my family, and having that is defining sort of that business mentorship, but a personal mentorship. You should also be, when you are being mentored, know that, or be the person who takes advice and takes criticism and grows on it. You know, so many times if somebody doesn't like what you say, and there's ways to deliver, I get it, you kind of think like, well, no, that's not me. I think sometimes for me it's been a lesson to go back and reflect and say, actually, maybe that's the way I come across, and maybe I can change that way. And so much of that has opened doors in terms of the way I've maneuvered my career as well. So.
That's awesome. So for me, your circle of trust, I call them my board of directors. So I have a mentor, and not even a mentor, I have swaths of people for every single vertical of my life. For instance, I value fitness. I literally have like 20 people who are fitness enthusiasts that gets me to where I want to go. Or when it comes to business, oh man, that's hundreds of people as well when it comes to business. So for me, it's about how do I nurture that? I communicate. Like literally, I call them, I text them. I'm always on top of mind, because how can someone mentor me if they don't even know what my life is? So whenever I have a struggle or a need or anything, I make sure I'm fully transparent with them, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's gonna hurt. It's almost like therapy. You just need to just say it, and then they are able to actually help you. And then with that, how to pay it forward. For instance, some of my mentors do speak internationally, so whenever they're in their country, I do my best to show up. And if it's too expensive, I will figure out a way to buy a ticket to show up to support them. Or if I can't do anything, then maybe I'll work on their Instagram, or I'll clean their house, whatever it is. No, literally, like I like for Denise by Design, I offer closet organization, so I just did it. I just cleaned out the whole closet. So whatever it is, I'm trying to showcase that I'm grateful and that I am available and that I am listening. And if they give me feedback like, oh, you're coming off abrasive or whatever it is, I listen and I do my best to change, because they went through the maze already. They're living the lives I want to live. Actually, one of the sayings that I live by is, show me a mentor, show me a future. So if your mentor is not living the life you want to live, then I don't understand logically. So, so with that in mind, my mentors are living the life I want to live, so I'm going to do my best to honor them and get the work done.
I have two mentors that are really cool. We became friends first because we were volunteering for the same organization. And from that I kind of made them my mentors. And so what you were saying, Denise, about listening, like listening is so important, because sometimes our egos can get in the way, and you're just like so focused on what you want to do and this is it. And then when someone critiques you, you're just like, oh, you know, that can't be that. So listening is really important, and then reassessing yourself all the time and taking that advice. Because one of my mentors, I pitched to him one day our idea, like really early on, and he just straight up said, no one will believe you. And that was the best advice, because that made me go back and redo everything so that people would believe us. So once you have identified someone who they're willing to be your mentor, just keeping that relationship going, whether it's coffee, lunch, dinner, don't just go to them when you have a question. It has to be a full-fledged relationship so that they feel comfortable giving you advice and you feel comfortable accepting it.
Thank you. I'm gonna go here and then.
So while you're, I guess, doing your startup or going through your startup, how and when do you decide to like hire your first employee, as opposed to like doing it yourself, or like asking to do it for free, or finding a way to just get it done?
Depending upon how many, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
you
just
want to
really,
repeat that?
yeah. So the question was, when do you decide to hire your first employee as opposed to doing the work yourself, or finding the work for free, or just making it work?
Depending upon how many co-founders you have. If it's just you, you're going to do everything in the beginning. And then, unfortunately, the startup community abused interns. So the federal government changed the laws about how someone can intern with you. So you can rely on interns if you pay them like a stipend. Sometimes you can get people to volunteer to do things for you if they really believe in what you're doing. I would hold off on hiring people till as much as you can, because you don't have a lot of money. So you don't want to have a lot of staff and you don't have revenue coming in. So I would wait as long as possible or until you get the funding. And even when you get funding, when they look at, you know, people have looked at when VCs have looked at our pitch deck and they looked at our team and they looked at the people we want to hire, like, do you need all these people? You know, so you want to have a very tight, agile staff, but at the same time, you don't want to just have a whole bunch of people in positions because you're going to burn through the money and you're going to need that, you know, for the business and not just for a staff of people.
Was there a trigger though where you said, you know what, we have to hire somebody right now?
Yeah, if you get the business where it's more than you can handle, then you definitely need to hire someone. And now you can do that, you know, on a contract basis. They don't have to be a full-time staff person. I would go that route first and also it gives you a way to test someone out. You know, if they just have a 6-month contract, then you can see how they work for 6 months instead of hiring somebody full-time and you're like, oh God, this person sucks. So then now you gotta get rid of them, right? So I would try people out first, and that way you can be sure that's the right person for your team.
Yeah, that's definitely a mistake I made early. Again, we had 7 employees. Why? So every time we pitched a company, they on the last page of our pitch deck, they're like, why do you have so many people? Oh, because they're doing this and this and this. Can you reduce it? No. We had to, obviously. And then when we rehired people, they went through a trial period where they had to prove, again, grit and determination short. The most important hires, we had to hire quickly, unfortunately, because the CEO, he was busy working on the tech. We wanted to use AI, so he was so busy doing that. I was pitching all the time and networking and trying to find contacts. So that was a full-time job alone. And then we still had to run the business, so we had to hire basically a second marketing person who ran all social media, helped me with all of the assets that had to be typed out. So I would do a draft and then she would finish it off. Unfortunately, we did hire a photographer, did not need that. The graphic designer was needed because she helped a ton with everything else, but hire slowly, and again, think about what is the most important parts you truly need. Like, yes, you have your founders, so that's important, they are the face of the company, and actually choose who's the face of the company. 2 faces could be fine, but in terms of a marketer, you want 1 face because you want 1 streamlined idea. But yeah, hire slowly. You may not need everything you think you need at first.
And also they're fractional companies, like you're gonna need an accountant, you know, that kind of stuff. You don't have to bring an accountant on full time, you know, use those companies that have fractional services, so that way you're not spending up your money that way too.
Yeah, what was that company? Fiverr helps a lot.
Yeah.
I'm missing one. Rudy Godric founded it. Oh God, it's green logo. Anyways, so you can just basically hire people for like little bits and pieces to get it done. Yeah.
When you're thinking about hiring and you're looking for money, think of run rate. That's what they're going to keep asking you, the investors. What's your run rate? And if your employees eat into your run rate, you've probably got too many.
Thank you.
How's it going, guys? I wanted to make a statement about, sorry, I'm also recording for my YouTube. So I want to make first a statement about the funding issue, and then I have a question for Vandana. And before I do that, how about Gani?
About Missouri Sana.
So Vandana, I want to certify is an African, and Africans come in all shapes and sizes. I have some of my white South African co-workers here who always have to pull me, tell this guy I'm African. And Africans come in all shapes and sizes. My name is Rob Dembuse. I'm the author of the book On Silicon Valley, and I was a founder here in Seattle for 5 years. And I wrote that book because I built a company outside of Silicon Valley. I raised over $1 million, not through VCs. So the reality is this: women, less than 2% chance of you getting a VC funding. Black, if you're African American, it's less than 1%. So if you're trying to go in with all your eggs in a basket, like you're gonna try and raise money, your chances are very low. So you really have to create a dual path, and you have to have a strategy that allows you to continue developing your idea without VC if you don't get that. And that is very possible. It's in my book, I talk about it, but I do a case study of 2 billion-dollar companies and they've reached $1 billion without a single cent of VC. one of the key issues is your MVP and proving your ideas. Zappos is a very good example. The guy, I won't get into it, just look into it. He didn't build any technology to prove his hypothesis that people were ready to buy shoes online. And sometimes you don't need to build a tech to prove your hypothesis. That's a key issue. If you're thinking of an idea and you can't sleep, you're an entrepreneur and need to build that farm. That's as simple as it. So Vandana, for the question for you is, in my book, I actually do a study. I looked at the country you came from, Kenya. 75% of the founders in Kenya were white expatriates in an African country. 75% of the founders were white, mostly American and European expatriates. How are you going to address that for your fund once you go out? Because there's a ton of bias, and not only, I would say if you look at Nigeria, Nigeria has better stats, but a lot of the founders, guess what? It's not even a color and bias. It's have they come from Stanford? So it's African diaspora from the US have an advantage over the local and Africans who might be more aligned with the idea. And so that's a question for you.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know when that survey was taken, because what we have found in recent years, in particular with South Africa, Kenya, and then a couple of the West African countries, is that is changing. And the reason is changing is because of the private equity sort of spectrum that has looked into African investments has changed the way the outside world thinks about investments out of Africa, right? Now, a great example is M-Pesa. It wasn't a white founder, came from those countries. There's a lot of technology that's happening. There's a lot of incubators, a lot of accelerators that are going into Africa that are slowly changing that spectrum. And then there is individuals. So I am fourth generation. I go back 4 times a year for free advice, right? I hold sessions, and there's so many people like myself who are like, listen, this is a country we grew up on. When we come back, we change the view by the story that we tell. So some of that is, it's a storytelling thing. One thing that we're going to be working with for Unreasonable and how we lose that spectrum is probably in 2021, our first Unreasonable Impact Africa program is what we're working through. The spring of 2020, we will hold our Future of Work in South Africa. The reason being, there's so many entrepreneurs that are coming out there, and if there's companies like us and the investors and the mentors that we're able to bring to the table are going to these countries, the investment will come, right? I think we talked about earlier that there's no shortage of ideas coming out of these countries. It's what is available to them in terms of resources, learning, and money is where we're trying to change the spectrum. There's a couple of people that, in fact, I'm working on the side. Like you said, they're always thinking of ideas. What are you thinking about? So on the side is a project where my brother and I have incubated. So we pay out of our own pocket a couple of engineers, and we bring kids generally from the slums who have great ideas, or just say they have an idea, and they work with those engineers for 6 months. If that's an idea that can be incubated, we actually take it to investors ourselves. If it's something that they can't, then we offer them scholarships to go to school. And that's gaining a lot of traction. So I think that the more that we, for me it's Kenyans, but as Africans come together, because we are all color, all creeds, all shapes, all sizes, we come together and band together no matter where we are in the world. We will change that story. So,
Thank you. Well, thank you, fabulous people, for coming out on a cold October night and hearing our fantastic panelists. If you want to find out more information on Black Women Talk Tech, the website is blackwomentalktech.com. You can sign up there for future events, and then we'd also like to thank our sponsors, Chase, for making this event possible, and of course the Riveter for their space. So you can